Hello, my Kindred friends. This is Christian from the Kindred Stamps Design Team. Today we are going to continue with what we discussed last month regarding masking. Last month we did a very clean and simple card where we made patterns that we used for determining how we were going to do our stamping, and we used masks to stamp our images and protect the other image from having any lines placed between them. This month, we're going to use those same patterns and masks to make a more advanced scene. So the first thing we're going to do is pull out our patterns. We're going to be utilizing these to really get an idea of how we want our card to look. To really understand how my scene is going to look on a card, I pull out some different type of templates that I have saved in my craft room. These are just panels that are cut out of very colorful cardstock in different sizes. I have mini slimline and slimline. I have an A7, which is a 5-inch by 7-inch card panel. I did these all in different colors just because it's more obvious to me what I'm grabbing. I also have an A6 card, which is 4.5 by 6.25 inches. Then finally, I have an A2 size card at 4.25 by 5.5. These panels give me an idea of what the parameters are for my card. I know exactly how large it can be and how that scene is going to look in there. So if you remember from last month, I am not an artist, but I did have a little idea of what I wanted to do on this card. So I did have that sketch pulled out for me to review and have a feel for how I wanted to do this. So now I need to determine, how does this fit on the card? Is an A2 size going to fit all these characters that I wanted on there? I wanted the blob, the lovely lady, the creepy creature, and then our vacuum seal dude. And looking at this, when I saw it on my panel, utilizing my patterns, I'm like, this looks a little congested. I check out, will my sentiment look right on there? It's feeling pretty small. So maybe an A2 size is not the size that I want to utilize. Next, I pull out my A6 panel. The A6 panel is a panel, again, of 4.5 by 6.25, and I place my little patterns onto this paper. When I look at this, I feel like my characters have space to breathe and they're not being confined to such a small space. Last month, we also talked about how do we arrange our characters. Because we had a very clean and simple card with just the two characters, it was very easy for us to lay our patterns on the piece of paper and line up our stamps. And we didn't have any fear with removing our image, again, because we just had the two. This time, we have more characters on our screen. So you're seeing I'm pulling out and taping down with some low tack tape my patterns to this template. I will be able to use these same patterns for lining up my stamps on my stamping platform. Again, being able to determine which characters are in the forefront and which are in the background. Pulling out my MISTI, I put my template into my stamping platform to really see where my characters lie. I can see that my vacuum seal guy, creepy creature, and lovely lady are all in the foreground, and my blob is in the background. I'll go ahead and put an A6 panel of cardstock into my MISTI into that corner again, then lining up my template on top. I'll pull out the stamps that are in the foreground. Because these stamps do not touch each other or are near each other, I'm going to go ahead and stamp all three of these characters at one time. So I'll line up my vacuum seal guy, pull out my creature, and pull out my lovely lady. Once my images are picked up on my stamping platform, I am able to remove that template with no fear of losing any of my spots from my patterns. You can see my vacuum seal guy popped off, but that's okay because I don't need him anymore as a pattern once I have my images stamped. With the three characters stamped, I did a little cleanup because you don't need to watch that. I cut that out. It's not that exciting. No, it's not. But I did pull out my stamp set. If you recall from last month, this is where I had stored my used masks. They still have lots of life to give, so I'm going to continue using them. As we discussed last month, when you are placing your masks, you have to be very particular in how you place them. If they are not aligned inside of the stamped image of that black line, you will see any defect in your alignment when we proceed with our ink blending. So again, make sure that your images are lined up appropriately so that you do not have a white gap or a line going through your image when it should not. I am showing you on our lovely lady here the area near her armpit that I cut out. This was because in my original intention I was going to have that character sitting further down on my template and you would see the ink blending through that section. It was unnecessary, but I still now have this for future use. With my masks in place on those three characters, I am pulling out my template again. Here I'm just removing my patterns of the characters that I do not need. And I am lining this up so that I can go ahead and get my blob onto this picture. With the blob stamped, I did some cleanup and placed a mask onto the card just as with the three prior characters. This is going to allow me to add some more imagery to my panel, as well as to provide a space where I can do ink blending and not worry about coloring over my characters. To build my scene, I felt that my blob, as well as my vacuum seal guy, needed to be up on some type of a platform. So I'm just pulling out some masking magic. This masking magic is the same stuff that we used last month. It's the same piece even that we had done. And I'm just going to freehand draw a little pedestal for each of these characters to sit on. Once my pedestals were to my liking, I did just place those directly over the current masks that were in place because they are going to be colored in with an alcohol marker at another time. To complete my layout, I just grab a piece of Post-it tape that I'm going to use as my floor to wall for the background of my card. So I just go ahead and stick that on top of all the masks that again are there. So we'll go ahead and start with some ink blending. I chose some earthy tones for the background wall and then different earthy tones for the floor itself. First off, I cleaned off my blending brushes because you never know what color I used last. I don't know about you. I'm kind of sloppy that way, so a little touch-up always does a little good. I obviously am not that fast of an ink blender, but we had to go through some warp speed again so that we can continue on with this card. Now that the wall is colored, I'm going to remove the Post-it tape from my card panel, being careful not to pull up the other masking paper that I have below. After a little dry time, I did use the same piece of Post-it tape to then mark off the area for the wall to the floor. I will then ink blend the floor at warp speed again. With the floor complete, I need to clean up all the mucky muck all over my board so that we can continue on with actually coloring the images now. I do have to say these glass boards are amazing for cleanup. A little spritz of water, a couple little wipes, and ta-da, it's nice and clean. So now I'm removing my Post-it tape, and I noticed that when I lined up my Post-it tape, I didn't do such a hot job. There's a little white line, which that's the point of the mask and why you have to put them where you need to, and you're supposed to line it up perfectly, but sometimes you don't, so it happens. I just filled that in with a little bit of ink that was still on my blending brush and problem solved. Now it's magic time. This is my favorite part of doing masking, is removing these masks and seeing what is underneath it. Did I leave myself a coloring page just as if I had a coloring book in front of me as a kid? And sure enough, I did. As each of the masks come off of my card panel, I place them immediately onto the back of my stamp set. Again, this is where I just store them so that I have them, and we will use them again next month when we dive deeper into watercolor and masking with watercolor. With all the masks removed, I did grab out a alcohol ink friendly pen and drew in lines so that my platforms looked like the stamped images. So my pen that I'm using is a 005 fine liner, so it's nice and thin and it matches the design and look of the stamp images themselves. Then I came in and decided that my little pedestals needed a little help. They looked like just weird rectangles, so I needed to give them some shape and dimension. With my design drawn, I went in with the same fine liner and outlined the little decorations on the front of our platform. Because alcohol ink is transparent, I needed to erase all of my pencil lines that were seen. The alcohol will trap them and you will not be able to unsee it. I then noticed that my floor and my wall kind of blended together because, I had that little oopsie where I didn't line it up correctly, whoops. So I just decided to take that fine liner and just freehand a line since the colors kind of go up. It looks a little grungy and dirty. I'm imagining this den probably was not the cleanest anyway. I pulled out my Olo markers and am finally ready to start coloring my image. We have our background done, we have the fine details done, now it's time to start playing. Whenever I am working with coloring, and I already did it once before, I keep a piece of paper that has all of my characters' information on it inside of my stamp envelope. I know there are so many different ways to store this information. Some people are amazing. They keep them in notebooks and they have it all itemized out and stamped and they keep a color copy of it. I'm not that advanced. I just stick the piece of paper into my stamp envelope and hope for the best when I pull it out next time that I wrote down the right numbers and that it's going to look kind of how I did it the first time around. As we discussed, I am not a colorist. I will give you some tidbits on what I did and why I do it, but I am not the expert at this. There are so many other people out there that are amazing and I just could sit and watch them color all day long. Me, I get through it. It gets the job done. It looks cute most of the time, and that works for me. I'm not a perfectionist. Okay, that's a lie. I am a perfectionist, but it's a handmade card. It's to look handmade. I always tend to start with my lightest colors that have the highest risk of me touching a dark color and causing it to bleed. So in this card, I started with my Lovely Lady's Flesh Tone and proceeded on from there. We will fast forward through the coloring just as we have done in the first episode. It will be at a Mach 20, I believe it's called. I'm not quite sure, but it is definitely really fast. So I will let you just enjoy that as I chit-chat a little bit. The blob and the creepy creature were colored with the same colors as in last month's video. Each of us color in our own way. We either do dark to light, light to dark, or whatever medium we're using, pencil or crayon or paint. We each have our own techniques and practices. Understanding and knowing how to use your markers is the key to have a successful coloring experience. You will see that my Olo markers are not set up like other people's Olo markers. Yes, these markers can be back to back where you can have two tones, so then you have less space that's occupied, and you can flip from one side to the other side for your tones, being a light tone on one end and a dark tone on the other end. I chose to keep my marker as one marker complete so that I did not have to flop between two, and because I am not a coloring expert, I have to constantly look at my lids. So I keep my marker with the brush nib on one end, a jumper ring, And then I keep a refill because I'm always afraid of running out of something. I keep a refill on the back end. That way I always know when I need to place an order or when I need to do a refill. You will also see that as I start to go through my coloring here, depending on what you're seeing on the screen right now, because I'm doing a voiceover, you'll see that I do keep my markers in a line. So I try to keep the lid, then the marker, that's that coordinating lid, then I'll do the next lid and the next color and go on forward with that, just so that I can keep them all together so I know what color's what, where it's at, and then when I'm grabbing them, I'm grabbing the correct one. Because I have done it more than once where I thought I was grabbing the light and I grabbed the dark, and now I have a weird highlight because my highlight's now as dark can be, and I'm trying to figure out how can I fix that. So you pull out the Color of Splendor, you hope for the best, it doesn't take it away, and then now you got a big blob, you know, we've all been there, and now you have a pop-up element to cover up what you messed up. It happens. And this, my friends, is why pets are so much fun. I kept getting interrupted by a little furry white dog, and I kept recording and unrecording the wrong parts of the video. So by the magic of editing, I all of a sudden had a completed pedestals. So I'm so sorry. Oscar says sorry. Now that we're recovered from the hiatus of coloring our pedestals, I just wanted to share with you the Olo markers that I used for the different characters, from our blob, our creepy creature, our vacuum seal dude, and our girly girl, or lovely lady, whatever you'd like to call her. With the card base completed, I decided that I wanted to have my card popped up with a frame around the edges, utilizing a brown metallic pearly colored cardstock. To do this, I took an 1/8 inch off of each corner or each side of my card so that it was actually just a 1/4 inch total. I did this so that my image would be centered and it wouldn't look so wonky, and that it would accommodate all of my needs. Pulling out my stamping platform, I placed the panel into the corner and then stamped the sentiment, "I wouldn't trade you for the world." I did this in a pigment ink so that I could use clear embossing powder on top of the ink while it was still wet, so I could heat set it so I'd have a little shine on my card. Utilizing a wide foam tape, because I learned my lesson last time with the skinny foam tape, I was able to put my foam on a lot faster and have a lot less to peel off onto the back of my panel. This was then adhered to a piece of that brown metallic pearly looking cardstock that I was talking about, that I dug from my stash from probably 20 years ago, because why would you throw something out when it will be used one day eventually? To finish up my card, I putzed around with the same black glaze pen as I did prior month. You know, eventually I'll just get a new one. It does have that yellow piece of tape on it to remind me that this one does not work. Use the other one. Do I remember that? No. No, I do not. I also pulled out a gold metallic gel pen from who knows when and used that for the little hoops on my lovely lady. Finally, I finished off the card by adding some highlights with the white gel pen, which amazingly worked. I know, shocker. And just like that, we have a masking card. This card was much more complex compared to our simple stamping we did last month. But by utilizing our patterns, utilizing our template to determine what size card is best, and then placing those masks in a particular order, we were able to get the card completed. I can't wait to see what you design on your next card using masking. Don't forget to post it on the Kindred Stamps fan club page on Facebook. Next month, we'll complete our series on masking as we dive into masking on watercolor. Take care, my friends.